Actually, we're ahead of where we thought we'd be. The development program went incredibly fast, great enthusiasm by patients and investigators, and everything moved along, not just on time, but ahead of schedule. Well, I'd actually say that the genetic story that developed in 2003 and then really came with true target validation in 2006 taught us that if we could recapitulate the genetics by blocking PCSK9 with an antibody, we would be able to dramatically lower LDL. And so in many ways, our program has really just simply been able to redo what nature's already done. So the next aspect is to then be able to demonstrate, just like nature's shown, that reducing LDL by PCSK9 will improve cardiac outcomes. We've had great enthusiasm by physicians and patients who've been able to get their LDLs under control for the first time, really, in their lives. So it's been really very positive. When we've looked at our program overall, we've seen no imbalance. There's no signal for neurocognitive decline. And in fact, actually, some of the patients who are on our up-titration dose may actually have a lower rate of neurocognitive impairment. But overall, we've seen that this is done well, but we're going to continue to monitor this going forward in our outcome trial and usual pharmacovigilance approaches. Statin intolerance is really hard for physicians to be able to manage. It's very difficult to diagnose, and most of all, it's very difficult for the patients themselves. We know that statins are associated with some levels of myalgia muscle pain, and that's real, but we don't have good biomarkers for it. But we know that patients themselves who have high levels of LDL and are high cardiovascular risk need to get that LDL down. And for those who can't take statins because of this muscle pain, they need something else. And we think that PCSK9 offers that important option for them. Statins are the standard of care. We have hundreds of thousands of patient years worth of data demonstrating the safety, the tolerability, and most importantly, the outcomes benefits with statins. So I'm a cardiologist. I am incredibly enthusiastic about statins, as are all of us in the cardiology community. Statins are frontline therapy. Patients should be on the maximal tolerated dose of statin if they need to be on a statin, but only if their LDL is still elevated beyond where it should be, and they're at high risk, or they have FH and they have coronary disease, then PCSK9 may come into the treatment for those patients. Statins are absolutely the key. The fact is that this is an incredibly new science. Like I said, 2003, PCSK9's association with LDL and cardiovascular risk was first discovered. Here we are, just a little over a decade later. PCSK9 went from initial genetic discovery. Here we have actual therapies that are on the market. It's incredible. It really changes the entire landscape for individual patients. As a physician, I've had many patients who've not been able to get their LDL under control. PCSK9 inhibition, Praluent specifically, is able to help those patients who've really not been able to get their LDL down, whether it's the patient who's lived with familiar hypercholesterolemia for their entire life, or it's the patient who's had a recent cardiovascular event and now knows they need to get that LDL down, but they can't with statins. This is a great option for those very high-risk patients. Well, Praluent is available in two doses, 75 and 150 milligrams, delivered every 2 weeks. Both provide very robust lowering in LDL. In fact, the lowering by the 75 milligrams is so robust that it's actually the recommended starting dose, because the majority of patients get to their goal just with the 75 milligram dose alone. Patients who don't get to that goal can be up-titrated to 150 milligrams. Alternatively, for patients who really require much more LDL lowering at the outset, their 150 milligrams is a good starting dose option for them. Dosing should be individualized. Each patient is an individual, and based on their LDL baseline, on top of maximally tolerated dose of statin, as well as their overall LDL target goal, physicians should be able to individualize therapy with this flexible dosing regimen. It can easily be flexible. You basically can as a physician, you can individualize the therapy for your individual patients based on that patient's response to therapy and your overall goals of therapy. In fact, the 75 milligram dose provides 45 to 50% reduction in LDL on top of what you get with statins. Use of 150 milligrams provides approximately 15% greater efficacy for about a 60+% reduction in LDL, again, on top of what you get with statins themselves. The fact is that you can use the dose to individualize therapy. Wherever you want that LDL to go, you can use a flexible dosing regimen. If you want to treat to a specific LDL target goal, one could use a flexible dosing regimen. Alternatively, if you're looking for maximal LDL reduction, one could use the 150 milligram dose to get that LDL as low as possible. It's all individual because each one of our patients is truly an individual. Well, we expect that right now it'll be the focus of cardiologists, but these patients are taken care of by primary care physicians who are many times measuring those LDL values. It's very important that cardiologists, endocrinologists, and primary care physicians all understand this field because they're going to be seeing those patients. PCSK9 Praluent is to be prescribed on top of maximally dosed doses of statin for patients with either familial hypercholesterolemia or those who've got atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease who need additional LDL lowering. So the first thing is to get that patient onto their maximal tolerated dose of statin. If they need additional LDL lowering, then one can prescribe Praluent. We've seen a very favorable safety profile in the clinical program, and that is something that was reviewed very carefully with both the FDA as well as the EMA as part of the approval process here. So of course we'll be continuing to look at this going forward, but everything's looking good so far. The question about can PCSK9 inhibition with Praluent lower LDL, I think that's been very, very well answered. The next question is, will PCSK9 inhibition with Praluent reduce cardiovascular events? We've had some early good signals from the studies that we've done, but the definitive study is the outcome study, and we're well underway and very excited to get those results to our patients and physicians as fast as possible.